1 second. All right, here we go. Welcome, everybody. This is Justin from Stillness in a Storm, and this is a subscriber chat and basically bi-monthly news, review, discussion, philosophy, spirituality, patriotism, Christianity, all things information, truth, experience, and all that great stuff. So this isn't as formal as I would normally like, but I'm trying to juggle multiple plates at once here. And I can assure you that as time goes on, these streams and the content that I produce outside of Stillness in the Storm and Into the Storm, which is on edgeofwonder.tv, will be more consistent. So there's going to be more regularity around the news, information, discussion that comes from me in this kind of public capacity that you see here. So I just want to let everybody know about that. So welcome. My name is Justin, everybody. I am the founder and CEO of Stillness in the Storm. So we were going to have our usual first half free on YouTube, second half where I get to talk about all the things I can't say on YouTube in the actual Zoom room. So if you're just getting to the stream right now, welcome. Really glad to have you here. Thank you so much for taking interest in everything that's being discussed here. The truth, information, spiritual growth, togetherness, fellowship, actually trying to make the world a better place. These are things that I actually really care about. And a lot of people care about, actually. And for far too long, the people who care and are sensitive to the trials and travails of the world have sat quiet and let evil people run amok. And that time is ending. And it's about time. So welcome. Go ahead and sound off in the chat if you're on YouTube. Go ahead and scroll up. I'm going to pop in the chat the subscribe star. So the way this works, if this is the first time you're coming onto the stream, is I'm going to stream for free on YouTube. And there's things I just can't say on YouTube. There's a lot of things I can't say, actually. So a lot of the best discussion happens in the private version of this. So if you want to join that private version, which I strongly encourage you to, I love interacting with the readers and people who watch Into the Storm and all the great conversation that we have here. Some of the best stuff can sometimes come from that interpersonal interaction. So if you want to join, I'd really love for you to join. Go ahead and go to the subscribe star link I put in the chat on YouTube. You can also go into the description. It should be in there. And for whatever reason, if it isn't in there, just go to subscribestar.com/stillness-in-the-storm. You can subscribe for as little as $3 a month. You can have access to the stream, so you can suggest video content, you can suggest topics of discussion, things that I will personally research, try to figure out what the heck it is, and let you guys know what I found. And so I would really like to have you participate in something like that. So go ahead and join on that. You're going to have access to the Zoom version of this chat. And once you're joined into the Zoom run, you can ask me questions directly. We can interact, and you get all the benefits of that censorship-free version of this live stream. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, as usual, there's a mountain of stuff to discuss. I can tell you, sometimes it's challenging just to figure out what you want to talk about. I'm on the other end of the challenge where it's like I have to try to figure out things not to talk about because there's so much to talk about. So one of the blessings and curses of having a kind of omnivorous appetite for information and philosophy and thinking is that there's just endless amounts of things to talk about. And this is relevant stuff. This isn't just like, oh, look how beautiful the flowers are today. It's stuff that directly affects our lives. So today we're going to talk about on the YouTube end of things. Let's see here. There's a pretty big development happening right now with the Supreme Court travel records. We're going to get into that a little bit today. We're going to talk about the Biden administration saying that they're going to buy and distribute 500 million Pfizer vaccines and donate those to the world. That reeks of money laundering and other scams, so we'll get into that. We're also going to talk about some good news, which is Florida removing and banning critical race theory from classrooms, and several other things. This is really adorable video of an 8-year-old talking at a high school. I found like a 30-second version of that, not a high school, excuse me, at a city council meeting, I believe. And I couldn't find the whole video. The whole video is like 2.5 minutes, apparently. Well, I found the whole video and it's awesome. So I wanted to show you guys that. We might start with that, or I might put it in between too, and we'll see how things go. And in the financial news, there's some things happening in the financial news that you guys aren't going to want to miss. I mean, yeah, lots to talk. Like I said, just on that financial topic alone, we could probably have like 2 hours of discussion. There's just a lot to get into. Now, on the non-YouTube side of this, we're going to get into some of the election irregularities. I have to be careful how I phrase this. That there's major developments happening in a good way with respect to that. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. I'm going to introduce something. Basically, there's 2 additions I'm going to make to these live streams, because I've been wanting to talk about all sorts of awesome stuff, but packing it in can be difficult. So I'm going to build 2 segments directly into the stream. One of them is going to be kind of me pulling back the curtain on how the deeper aspects of the cabal and control system and New World Order work. How do they actually influence people? How is the cabal organized? What is the deep state religion? How does Satanism play a role in this? How badly have religions been corrupted? How much is your everyday life impacted by these influences? What can you do about these things? You know, I'm going to start to reveal some of this stuff in digestible chunks as much as I reasonably can. And this is why I really need you guys to offer your feedback. Like, you know, when it comes to psychology of teaching or sharing information, you know, I can, you know, I'm a thinker and a talker, so I can sit here and, you know, talk to the end of time. But are you going to be able to get anything out of that? I don't know. It's hard for me as a speaker and a researcher and a personality on YouTube, whatever that means, to know whether or not what I'm saying is even finding purchase, or if you're tracking it. And so a discussion is actually way better for both parties. So when we start to talk about some of this stuff, when I'm introducing these segments, I'd really like your feedback. Like, so if you are a member on Subscribestar, please put your feedback in the video. Either you can do so directly in the Zoom room as I'm speaking, or I will post the video of this stream probably tomorrow. And if you could just post your feedback on there, that would be great. Or if you're on YouTube and you hear something I say, please give me some feedback. I'd love the feedback. I always love the feedback, good or bad. Even as a matter of fact, sometimes I'll get messages from people saying, hey man, I really like your content, but what's up with that thing on your face, that mustache? Like, if you just didn't look like the Monopoly man, I could take you more seriously. You know, fair enough. People have all sorts of issues with people's physical appearances for whatever reasons. And there's a whole lot of psychology we could get into there, but I don't mind. You can tell me how much you love my facial hair or not. It's not going to bother me. So open lines to feedback. So we're going to talk about a discussion. The discussion about exposing the cabal. I have entitled this particular segment, Cabal Deal with the Devil, Eating the Shit. Yeah, sounds as tasty as you might imagine. So we're going to get into that on the private side of the chat. We're going to get into something really, I think, is really big with the exposure of the coronavirus pandemic. I really want to be careful about what I say, but let's just say that the theater and conspiracy around that topic had a major development happen this week. You're going to want to hear about it. Get on the subscriber chat, go to Subscribestar so you can get access to that, because this is going to be some big stuff. And let's see. The other thing is I have some subscribers that consistently ask me about the Urantia book, spirituality, spiritual psychology, all sorts of cool stuff like that, which I'm really into. So what I'm going to do is try to, because the Urantia book and creation and Christianity and Jesus and all sorts of spiritual topics are massive and could take up a ton of time, I'm going to put those at the end of the discussion. So I got a whole bunch on the Urantian creation myth that we're going to talk about today. So last housekeeping item. I've been having a really hard time putting these, the videos. So there's like the recording, that's the word I'm looking for. I've been having a hard time putting the whole recording, which usually goes like 2.5 hours, on Subscribestar. Subscribestar only gives you like 150 megabytes of footage to work with. So I'd have to make the file like so tiny and so low resolution that it'd be almost unwatchable. So y'all have been getting a really cool perk, because what I've been doing in response to that is I just put it on my public channels. So basically the whole recording is for free. Now, what you don't get for free is the interaction. So that's the part that I really would like you to, go to Subscribestar, pay the $3 a month, support my work, support Stillness in a Storm staff, so that we can keep doing this amazing content. So right now, most of that content is living on Rumble. I originally didn't want it to be on Rumble. I wanted it to be on Bitchute, because I wanted to keep Rumble like kind of a place where videos would go, and then, Subscribestar or subscriber chat archives would live on another place. It's been really difficult for me to get that uploaded to Bitchute. So right now it's probably going to be on Rumble. So you'll probably be able to get to see the recording of this subscriber chat on Rumble. And eventually I'll figure out a solution for putting the archive only on Subscribestar, so you have to pay to see it. And we'll also find a way to do more consistent content in that regard. But right now I'm working about anywhere from 70 to 80 to 90 hours a week right now, trying to juggle all the things I'm doing. So I really appreciate everybody's patience. This is something I'm really passionate about, and I wanted to keep doing it. And like I said, I like the interaction. So hello, everybody. All right, let's see. So if you're in YouTube, thanks, Marty. Apparently I'm taking too much time with the housekeeping. Sure, no problem. I will do my best. So if you're on YouTube, how's it going? Let me know what you're up to. If you got any questions, you can certainly pop them, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to them. If you're on Zoom, hello, everybody. Please use the chat. I'm going to be paying attention to that and answering your questions as much as I can. So let's get right into our first item. Let's see. So I'm going to pull up this. Let's hide that. So this is a pretty big story. This is a story happening that just broke this week. Let me get my share screen up and running, and then I'll read you what I have this week. So this is a story about the Supreme Court and their travel records. So what's this all about? Well, two senators requested travel records of the Supreme Court justices, asking the Justice Department and U.S. Marshal Service for information and documents going back 10 years. Senator Whitehouse is the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Federal Courts Oversight, Agency Action, and Federal Rights. So he's part of the subcommittee on oversight. So he's supposed to ask for these things. So this basically means Whitehouse is well within his right, the senator is well within his mandate and rights to ask for this travel information. So on the surface, it's like, well, it's no big deal. He's part of the oversight committee. He's supposed to ask for travel records and all sorts of things to make sure that what people are doing is within the law and what they're supposed to do. Well, for those of you who don't know, the Supreme Court is not exactly a squeaky clean organization. As a matter of fact, when I was preparing for this story, there was a mountain of suspicious things that I think were happening. So I'm going to list a few of them here, but let's keep going. So some suspect, so what's the deal with this request? Well, some suspect that the long-standing corruption of the Supreme Court justices might be finally investigated. For instance, Justice Scalia was suspiciously killed on a hunting trip in February 2016, the fateful year that the cabal selected presidential hopeful Hillary Clinton, and was suspected, and she was basically selected. She was kind of guaranteed to take office in 2016. At least that's what the theory is. And mind you, I have to use, or I am attempting to frame all of this in a kind of YouTube-friendly way. So there's a lot more I would like to say. but I'm going to use language that tries to prevent the YouTube video from getting flagged as much as I reasonably can. So isn't it weird that Scalia was killed in 2016? Now, suspiciously, Justice Scalia went on 259 expenses paid trips from 2004 to 2014. That's a lot of trips, everybody. That's about 25 trips a year, all expense paid trips in 10 years. I mean, that's 25. That's a lot of trips. Like, I can't even imagine myself taking more than like 2 or 3 trips, let alone 10, let alone 25. I mean, wow, that's a lot of trips. What the heck is he doing on these trips? You know, St. James Island, anybody? I mean, I'm not making any definitive claims that Scalia was involved with Epstein and any of the things that happened there, but you know, anybody who's researched political corruption knows that pay for play is a huge deal. So if you're not aware, let me lay it all out for you. It's the basic idea of how it works. Why is politics and law and various positions of power so big? Why is it such a big influence? Well, it's a big influence because when you are in a position of power like that, when you're occupying an office like Congress, like the Supreme Court, your decision have definitive impact on life and society, and particularly in how money's spent and all these things. So if a decision in the Supreme Court is made, like let's say you're taking a case up to the Supreme Court because you want to argue that China's right to sell goods and services in the United States where they use slave labor is unconstitutional because it deprives American businesses the opportunity to bring their goods and services to bear without necessarily using slave labor. And I'm using this example as a way to kind of work in another discussion, which is there's a reason why we don't want Chinese goods in America. One of them is because they're made by slaves. You know, it's funny, we live in this like hyper woke, you know, we can't have any racism. You know, we have to make people who own slaves back in the colonial times pay for the reparations and all these things. And I got these Hilton like vacation suites people just constantly calling me. I'm going to have to put them on some kind of spam report. But anyway, you know, slave laborers and slavery and the history of slavery, it's like, oh my God, it's so awful. 1619 Project to the end of time, right? And yet, probably the most glaringly obvious examples of horrific oppression and slavery and totalitarianism and patriarchy, if we want to use the left's terminology, is China and the fact that they're basically using slave labor. Like your devices, I mean, this is a Samsung, so it's not necessarily an Apple phone, but it might as well be with respect to cheap Chinese labor. It's basically slave labor. Like slaves basically made this good and most of the other Chinese goods that I use and a lot of people use. So getting to the Supreme Court example, if I, as a business manufacturer, let's say I'm trying to make like, you know, George Washington cell phones, but I'm having a hard time making my cell phones because if I used American labor to make my cell phones, the cell phone would be astronomically expensive. So these things are subsidized by the government, they're subsidized by big business, and they're subsidized by effectively forced Chinese slave labor. Now, it's not directly slave labor in the sense that they're people with whips like whipping people into submission necessarily, at least that we know of. But it is slave labor for all intents and purposes because people who aren't making a whole lot and have no upward mobility are producing these goods. So if you're Justice Scalia, I want to get my decision that I want to have. Well, it's just like it's worked all throughout history. You bribe somebody. Well, what happens when you bribe somebody? There's a money trail. There's an impact. So there's got to be a way to allow for bribery and methods of corruption within a corrupt society, which is the ones that exist on the world right now on Earth, to actually function. So you have pay for play. You don't give Scalia, let's say I'm Scalia, I'm the Supreme Court Justice, you don't give me a suitcase full of cash. What happens is we have a backroom deal. We have a way to communicate about what I'm going to get as the justice, Supreme Court Justice, in compensation for making sure your decision goes through properly. And that's distributed in some fashion. Well, maybe I travel to the Virgin Islands later that year, on an expenses paid trip and something happens there. Maybe my foundation gets a huge donation. There's all sorts of ways that this can happen. So my point in arguing all this is that I find it very suspicious that Justice Scalia had, again, 259 all expense paid trips. And that's just the ones that we know of. That's a lot of vacation time, like a ridiculous amount of vacation time. So is it possible that Scalia and other justices are engaging in, basically pay for play activity? Or more to the point, are they bought and paid for agents of the New World Order agenda and the Cabal agenda? I think it's unquestionable. I mean, if you look at the grand agenda of the Cabal, which involves transhumanism, which involves eugenics, which involves population control, which involves self-running slavery systems, totalitarian regimes like the ones we have now, then everything that has happened, well, not everything, but a good chunk of the decisions that have happened in the Supreme Court over the past 60 years and way back further than that are all leading to this point. So there's unquestionably a benefit. Now, is this investigation that White House and Kennedy, and I couldn't find any connection, by the way. John Kennedy is the guy's name. So there's Senator Whitehouse and John Kennedy. These are the two senators that have put forth the request for travel records. So is it possible that these guys are trying to get travel records so that they can, hold people to account, justices to account? I don't know, but let's keep in mind that the Supreme Court played a crucial role in the election that happened in November. That story is far from over. It's not, if you look at the mainstream media, they'd say, oh, well, everything's fine. There's decided, there's no corruption, there's no fraud, there's nothing. Everything's perfect, everything's gravy. If you question it, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist. Well, the bottom line is there's an audit happening right now in Arizona that's found a ton of irregularities. And there's a compelling case to be made for the fact that a preponderance of evidence, and this is what is required to bring a case like this forward in the Supreme Court, is going to be accumulated and exists already. I mean, anybody who's looked at what Mike Lindell's been able to put forth on his platform, Frank's speech, and his other documentaries like Absolute Proof and Absolute Interference, there's just a mountain of evidence. You'd have to be living under a rock to not acknowledge the significance. So what does this mean? So what's the point, Justin? Well, the point is that, as I mentioned in previous videos on my Rumble channel, I suggest you go back and watch some of them because I lay out some really big things, and the things I suggested there seem to be coming to pass. And I'm not saying that because it's like, oh, look at me, aren't I so amazing? I'm just saying that, when you use when you look at current events, when you study law, when you analyze the agenda of the cabal and you look at how they do things, which is something I've been doing, then it gives you the ability to kind of predict events. A few months ago, we had produced a video about how Trump could potentially be running for or positioning himself to be Speaker of the House, which is actually a way better position for somebody like him to be in with respect to taking out corruption, especially if we have some type of round up the bad guys scenario, we'll put it that way. Well, the Supreme Court justices played a huge role in ensuring that what happened in November of 2020 came to pass, that our buddy, Joe Biden is the one who's in office right now. They were instrumental in that. You might could even be argued that what happened on the 20th, what happened on the 6th of January and what happened in the Supreme Court, especially, was an extremely important series of events that led to, what we find ourselves in right now. Hold on, make sure my stream is still going here. Yeah, it is. Okay. So that means that this investigation into the Supreme Court and their travel records and what they were doing, think about it, like what happened on just before the 20th and leading up to the cases that were being brought forward, is in relation to discussing election irregularities. They directly involve the Supreme Court. Supposedly, what's his name? Roberts, Justice Roberts, was screaming at people in the Supreme Court, telling them that there was no way in hell they were going to let any cases be brought forward. Well, their excuse was that, oh, no, we're not inside the Supreme Court. That couldn't have happened. That's just wild conspiracy theory. Well, what if these travel records that are pulled expose the truth? What if these travel records not only expose the truth about what happened in relation to last year, but like years worth of corruption? It's all very possible. And I think, when you're trying to figure out what's going to happen in the future, how to interpret events, a situation like this is important. This event right here, the requesting of records, gives somebody like Whitehouse and Kennedy the ability to pull that information. Now, whether they decide to pull it or they do anything with it, that's up for grabs. We don't know. But I have a feeling that given what else has been happening, this is where I have to be careful about what I say, but given what else has been happening as a buildup to exposing the cabal, I think it's very likely that at the very least, if we don't see anything major happen over the next couple of weeks, the information that is collected from this request is going to get into a positive military person's hands. And that information is going to be useful at some future point as we lead up to some big crescendo event. I think we're still on track for that. Some people say, Justin, you're crazy. Like, just stop filling us with hopium. You stop talking about this. Listen, like in response to the black pillars out there, I'm just interpreting events. I'm looking at what is happening and I'm looking at it from this could be nothing perspective. And I'm looking at it from this could be something perspective. Entertaining possibilities is not spreading hopium. Telling people that, hey, I have this little crystal ball over here that tells me in September, Trump's going to come riding through Washington on a donkey and like save the world. And don't ask me how I know this because I've received it from divine providence. That's pushing hopium. I'm not doing that. And one last thing I wanted to mention about this whole SCOTUS situation is the Black Eye Club. Hopefully I can get away with this on YouTube. So the Black Eye Club, if you're not familiar, let me see, it might even let you pull it up on YouTube or on Google here. Let's see. Since I have the ability to pull up stuff, I highly doubt that we're going to get anything significant. Oh, look at that. We got some stuff. So for those of you who aren't aware, oh, here he is, the man himself, Justice Roberts. So he's got a black eye. What's this all about? As you can see, there are other celebrities. This is Susan Sarandon. It's got a black eye. Well, I don't know if this is real or not. It kind of looks fake, but there are other celebrities. Jennifer Lopez has a black eye. I've also seen a lot of other actors who have black eyes. As a matter of fact, let's see. Let me see if I can. Scar related to punch in the eye. I'm going to show you something. I've been noticing this. Yeah, this will work. So you see this mark right here. We'll use this one. See this little mark? When you're punched in the face, this bone right here will often make contact with one of the bones. Here, let me show you my beautiful face here. This will often make contact with one of the bones in your wrist, or I'm sorry, your knuckles. So when you punch somebody, that hard punch makes contact with the corner of your eye, and that creates this kind of telltale cut. You also see it sometimes in the eyebrow. There's a little bit, you can kind of see it here, but it's not really. It should be more towards the eyebrow, especially the periphery of the eye socket. You see these lesions as a result of a concussion, a high impact velocity punch, right? So when you're punched in the face, you can also have it if you're hit with a nightstick or something. You're going to get these cuts on the side of your eye. Next time you watch a big movie, pay attention to what actresses and actors have these cuts. I started noticing this even before I was into any of this, conspiracy woo-woo stuff. Back in like the early 2000s, I'm like, why is it? I noticed like Supergirl, for as a matter of fact, has it. There's a girl on the main actress in, oh, what the heck is that show? 828, I believe it is. She's got two of them. And I started to notice on women in particular, they had these eyes, these cuts on their eyes, like they'd been in like fist fights, like Fight Club. And so I'm like, well, what the heck is all this about? Why is it that actresses who you would think have lived cushy, pampered lives have eye scarring, like multiple scars often in some cases, as if they've been in like major fist fights? Now, if you've ever seen a fight with before in school, you know, it's not often that people land a punch to the extent that they actually have a major eye injury like that. So I in my experience, and you know, this is just me totally speculating, I think it's sketchy that you see this level of eye injury and black eyes and scarring as a result of assault and battery injury on a lot of celebrities, like major actresses, headline actresses having this eye injury, and that you can easily detect if you know what to look for. That seems a little ridiculous. And then the other thing too is now we're living in the age of like CGI technology. It is totally possible for these people to remove this. Like, you want to know a good example? In I believe it's Batman versus Superman with Alec Baldwin, not Alec Baldwin, with Ben Affleck. Ben Affleck has a ton of tattoos. Well, in all the shots where he's, you know, shirtless, one of them's in the shower, you see no tattoos. So they definitely have the CGI technology to totally erase any kind of eye scarring that you would see here. And yet we see this in movies and in TV shows. So why is this happening? Well, the roundabout answer I'm getting to all this is that you have the Black Eye Club. So the Black Eye Club, nobody really knows exactly what it is, at least as far as I've been able to tell. But the Black Eye Club is, let's see, let me find a good, here we go. This, oh man, that's a really terrible picture. Here we go, this is a much better one. So look at all these people. You got all these folks who've got black eyes. You know, why is it that all these people got black eyes? Now, I don't know if all of these pictures are real or whatnot, so don't hold me to the fact that I'm saying everything is, all the black eyes are legit here. It's entirely possible some of these might be movie makeup because they were playing a role in a movie and they just happened to get a photograph. You know, that one that Susan Sarandon had might have been a good example. But you got a lot of black eyes, you know. Here's our buddy Prince Andrew. So if you've studied the way the cabal control system works, as well as mafia agencies, as well as other historical examples of criminal syndicates, there is often the need for hazing and ritual initiation. For example, the Skull and Bones Club, according to a whistleblower, I believe he was actually there when John Kerry and George Bush were there, said that part of the reason, well, okay, let me back up it. When the Skull and Bones Club, Yale University, symbol of the skull and the bones, here, I'll pull it up since I got, since I have my screen already shared. There you go. So this is their symbol. So what is this in reference to? Well, in the Skull and Bones Society it's basically a secret society that it's very similar to the Freemasons. One of their initiation rites is the use of a coffin, where you as an initiate, a newcomer, you have to strip naked, get into the coffin, describe all of your most sick and twisted fantasies while you masturbate. And then there's, you know, several components. And the reason why is they want to get the dirt on you and they want to humiliate you. And part of that is doing something that exposes yourself. So there's a whole bunch of psychology we talk about there. The main point I want to get at here is with this Black Eye Club, I suspect that part of the occult mockery of being initiated into the cabal, or at least working as an agent for the cabal. And this is, by the way, what we're talking about right now, I'm going to discuss in much greater detail in the private version of this. Go to Subscribestar. It's in the chat or in the description. Sign up for $3 a month. You're going to get to hear about that discussion today. I've entitled it The Deal with the Devil, Eating the Shit, as they call it in Hollywood. And I have a source 1 degree of separation away from somebody who used to work in Hollywood who described it like that. So we're going to get into all that. So the Black Eye Club basically looks like it's one of these, it's an indication of a cult ritual, that you have a initiation rite that involves an initiate doing something to their physical person that marks them as being a part of the control system. Mark of the beast, you could even say. It has the same functional equivalency with respect to the categorical concept. So it's very similar. I suspect that the Supreme Court justices are part of this. So, so in conclusion of this story, I think that it's entirely possible that, where is it? Did I get rid of it? Oh, I guess I did. I think it's entirely possible that this situation with White House and Kennedy asking for the travel records of the Supreme Court justices, not just one, but all of the Supreme Court justices for the past 10 years is probably something that's pretty major. Whether or not this happens all the time, I can't say. I didn't find any indication that that's true. So that it does appear like this is not a normal request, although I could be wrong there. And that there's probably something major that's going to happen with this. So with that, I'm going to move on to my next story, which is, and then after that, I'm going to get to some questions in the YouTube. So let me pull this one up. So the Biden administration is expected to buy 500 million Pfizer coronavirus vaccine doses to donate to the world. Oh, how nice of him. Isn't that just a jolly, wonderful thing that he's doing? Well, hold on a second. It might not be all for altruistic purposes. It's entirely possible that what's happening with this is some type of money laundering. Now, you might be wondering, what do you mean money laundering? Well, this is what I mean. Let me get into this. So the Biden is expected to announce the plan at the G7, which apparently is happening right now. The richest nations of the world are being asked to use their financial power to assist poor and moderate nations in the global effort to vaccinate the world. Well, if you've seen any of my previous streams or paid any attention to the vaccine discussion right now, you know that there are a lot of people who are not so happy about taking the jab. We'll leave it at that. So while there's a laundry list of things we could discuss about how unnecessary and dangerous the global vaccine campaign is, I want to speak to money laundering operations. So what I want to discuss now, introduce to you, is the idea that a lot of money laundering happens. You got to realize that the way that the cabal works is they don't have infinite money. I know there's a kind of myth out there that the cabal is all powerful, that they know absolutely everything, that everything is planned completely, that everybody's in on it, that they can print money out of thin air, that it's all one organization and one family. You know, that the truth is that we're not dealing with an all-powerful entity or force here. The reality is, as far as I've been able to glean from my research, and part of this research rests on an analysis of financial records and financial activities reaching back 500 years. I didn't personally do this. I just happened to access the source of information who did this. You know, this whole idea of follow the money, if you look at the way money is exchanged and how things happen in a grand scheme of things, you can get a sense of who's in power and what kind of power they actually have. Well, imagine you take that idea and you don't just apply it to one event or one period of time. You look at it like thousands of events for 500 years, even before then. So this thing I'm about to discuss is not like oh, well, maybe it's true, but who knows thing. It's a pretty well-established concept. Charities are used for money laundering. So what is charity supposed to be? Well, charity as a principle is defined as providing help to those in need. History has shown that help has to be genuinely sought after. So what makes good charity, in other words? Well, this whole concept of charity has been pretty assaulted. So the real, pure, valid, and effective concept of charity is not really what we got in the world right now. So I'm going to describe like what good charity is first. So charity's principle is defined as, I already said that. History has shown that in order for charity to be effective, it has to be genuinely sought after. So you have to actually, the people you give charity to actually have to want help. If you try to give somebody help that they don't want, then it's not probably going to work out too well. It has to ennoble respectful dignity, that the person's dignity is going to be somewhat intact, and it has to materially improve the autonomy of the recipient, at the very least in terms of their spiritual capacity to improve their character and gain wisdom for their challenges in life. So charity has to actually try to make the person more capable of running their life for all intents and purposes. So for the most part, charity today does the total opposite. We're giving money and services to people that may not even want them. They might need something else, and we're giving them something else. And often we just create dependency, like perpetual dependencies, which is kind of a form of slavery. So charity as a cabal tool is one of the best ways to launder money, as well as siphon off wealth from a public benefit fund. So a lot of the cabal, what they do, and this is an idea that's been reached back all the way back to the Rothschild time, when their heyday, when they're Benjamin de Rothschild and I'm sorry, not Baron de Rothschild, and the other Nathan de Rothschild and the five brothers, they were sitting around coming up with their plans for how they were going to re-envision the financial landscape of the world back in the 1700s. They came up with the idea of a charity, basically, that we're going to take our funds, we're going to bequeath them into a public fund. So I'm going to take all of my riches, and you know what? Oh man, I've had such a good life. I'm going to put all my money into a charity, and then that money is going to go to help the poor. Well, what's really going to happen is that that money is still going to be mine, and we're going to help the poor by doing some event that's going to help them, like, and we're going to build houses. And the administrative costs for building houses is going to be like 1,000%. So in other words, that the vast majority of the money that's sitting in this charity, it goes into the charity. It's out of my hands as the financier. And then that goes to another company that I own or I receive a benefit from. And so it's just a way to funnel the assets. And because it was spent on the company now I have that profit. I can use it in other ways. So money laundering happens a lot in charities. Think about what's happening with these vaccines. So first of all, the vaccines are subsidized. Most people aren't buying the vaccine, which means somebody's paying for them. It's the government that's paying for them. So the United States and various other nations, presumably the other G7 countries like Russia, Britain, France, things like this, they have in their budgets earmarked money for vaccines. If you own a massive pharmaceutical company, then you're going to want to get your vaccine out there. And these pharmaceutical companies have found a way to go to these governments and say, hey, you need to take our vaccine and you need to give it to everybody in the world. Well, the way that they engineered for this to happen was, we call it coronavirus. I mean, there's a whole pandemic that happened that made everybody panic and believe that they needed these vaccines. Now, it's not enough that we're taking these vaccines. They have to make money off of it too. And I think that's what's happening. In this situation, it's entirely likely, and it might not be Biden himself, but the wholly owned subsidiary that owns Biden is likely going to use this funding effort to get a whole bunch of taxpayer money to make a bunch of vaccines for people that aren't even Americans. So on that level alone, where it's like, you don't even have to be into conspiracies to realize that, wait a minute, so my tax dollars are going to be going to fund making vaccines so that we can give them all over the world to people? Like, I'm not cool with that. I can barely pay my bills now. Why were you going to take money out of my tax dollars to do it? So on that level, it's not that great. So who owns these pharmaceutical companies? Well, that's a good question. As far as I can tell, a lot of the cabal families, I'm trying to decide if I want to say this word or not. I'll just go ahead and say it because I'm pretty sure, as odd as it sounds, this word isn't flagged. The Illuminati families, the 13 Illuminati families, a lot of them have stakes in the pharmaceutical industry. And yeah, so it's entirely possible that the taxpayer dollars, right? So Biden's going to get subsidies for out of the taxpayer dollar funds to make a whole bunch of vaccines, 500 million doses of Pfizer that he's going to take and give away to the world. And Pfizer is going to get a paycheck from the government to make these vaccines. And they're going to make God knows how much money, right? So maybe now's the time to buy up some Pfizer stock if you haven't already. So there you go. There's that story. So it's entirely possible. It seems like this whole, the main point I wanted to raise here was that the story, but also that the cabal often use multi-pronged efforts. If you've ever read, fascinating read, hard to grasp, but if you take your time with it, you can start to get some of the implications. It's called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. It was a document. It's not a complete document. I believe it's like 50, 60 pages of what some believe is a much longer document that appears to be a leak from one of these like Bilderberg meetings where it's talking about their plans and methods for, controlling the planet. So, yeah, it's what I'm basically describing is that in that document and in general, the way that the cabal works is they have multi-pronged agendas. They're not just going to have they're not just going to have an event that causes us to go into some new war on terror. They're also going to make sure that they own the weapons manufacturing contracts so that when that event happens, they make a lot of money that way. They're also going to make sure they pull money out of the stocks of the companies and the businesses that are going to suffer as a result of this event and make sure they take that money and put it in other places. So these people take advantage of literally every possible impact that they can come up with anyway for when an event goes through. It's a multi-pronged effort. So not only do they get their agenda moved forward, but they also make a ton of money doing it, and they fund their operations and do the things because there's a part of the spiritual law system that says they really can't just steal and take from us without doing things a certain way. We'll put it that way. So yeah, that's that. So before we continue on with the next one, I want to go ahead. We're going to go straight to, I'm happy to introduce, if you have not already gone to Stillness in the Storm, I'm going to show you a little bit of stuff first. Oh, this actually went to the wrong website, but we'll go here first. Stillness in the Storm. So this is, for those of you who don't know, this is Stillness in the Storm. Couple things. Stillness in the Storm got a facelift. As you can see, the homepage has changed a little bit. I just added some new menus up here, spruce some things up. There's a few little tweaks that we'll be doing, but for the most part, it's done. And I've made a 3-column setup for Stillness in the Storm. So if you're not used to seeing this, you got to zoom out a little bit. Some people like to have their page like zoomed in like crazy, like something like this. You're not going to see those sidebars, obviously. You got to zoom out a little bit, and you can see these sidebars. We put the trending stuff on here, so there's lots of cool ways to see the hot stories, the latest videos, editor's choice, other things like this. We'll have ads and all these other things on here, which will be really cool, different products we can offer. But it's just easier to see the content because the stories are smaller. We also have this left sidebar. We'll have other things that are coming on there, so really cool stuff. If you go to stillnessinthestorm.com and you click on store, then Stillness in the Store, Stillness in the Store, Stillness in the Store, just want to emphasize that, store, is now up. So you can access the store. You can get all of our amazing products that we have on here. There's lots of great stuff. We're partnered with Red Pill Living, so there's all sorts of really cool Patriot, American-made products that you can get on here. These, I also have clothing. These are things that I have designed and work with other designers who produce a lot of this stuff. So, please, if you want to support Stillness in the Storm, you don't necessarily want to do a donation. You want to get some cool merch. You want to get some products that could help you. This is a place to go. You're going to go to stillnessinthestore.com. If you for the next month, we're going to have a promo, 10% off on all products, on all of your purchases with the promo code SAVE10. So go ahead and check that out. Let me know of any feedback you have about stillnessinthestore.com, stillnessinthestore.com. And you can also, just to make sure you know about this, you can access Stillness in the Store by going to the store button here, and then eventually there's going to be other places where you can access us. So wanted to let everybody know about that. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's take a look at some questions if we got any on YouTube. Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, let's see. There's really how much. Okay, so somebody's talking about looking into gene decode. I've heard of that name before. So just to speak to this a little bit, I've had some people talk to me about, you know, I got to be careful about what I say here, whether or not the people, the celebrities, the politicians that we see are really them. Like, is Joe Biden really Joe Biden? Is it possible that he's a clone? He's a body double? I'm going to say that it's entirely possible that there could be clones and things running around. I don't know. I don't necessarily hold 100% conclusions on these things, and I don't really do that for anything. You know, part of the, in my experience, part of the best technique, I would say, so like the best way to do research is to not look for a definitive answer, but to just do the research and look for the information, and then hold your mind open to new perspectives as they come around. With respect to this idea about clones, and people like Joe Biden might not be who we think they are, and I have to be careful how I answer this, but I'm going to say something that, you know, should be okay. I want you to go online, do a Google search or DuckDuckGo, whatever search you want, and search for Joe Biden 2016, and then search for Joe Biden 2020. Start looking at some of his faces, some of the faces you see. Look at the pictures. Do you notice anything interesting? What facial features do you see? Think about that. Yeah, I'll try to get into a little bit more about this on the private chat. There's things I want to say, but I got to be careful about what I say on YouTube, of course. So with that, I'm going to leave that. If you have any other questions, go to the description. If you're on YouTube, look for Subscribe Star. We're going to start the subscriber chat here in a little bit. We're going to be able to get into a lot more stuff that I can't necessarily get into here. So let me just look at, okay, the rest of the stuff I will get into in the private chat. So we're going to have a cool discussion there. Next story, the Florida board votes to ban critical race theory from state classrooms. This is huge. Like, you want to talk about good news. This is really good. You know, you might not know, like, well, what's the big deal, Justin? Like, who cares if, wait, I need to start this. Who cares if Florida's doing this? What about all the other states? You know, that's not going to help us necessarily. Well, that's not necessarily true, because the way that the agenda works, it requires basically total compliance. So we're going to review this story, and then I'm going to talk to you about its implications and why it's such a good thing. So let's see here. I'll just close that out. So Florida adopted a new rule on yesterday, to prevent public schools from teaching critical race theory. A push led by Governor Ron DeSantis to prevent history that would, quote, denigrate the founding fathers. Despite the fact that no state policy to teach critical race theory was in place, DeSantis spearheaded the initiative. So what's the big deal? Like, who cares if critical race theory's out of Florida? Well, I've mentioned this before, but I'm going to reiterate it because it's really important. How do you get people to buy into a lie? Well, most people, as odd as it sounds, or maybe not as odd as it sounds, most people, despite the fact that they might not be the most brilliant minds ever generally can identify when they're being lied to a certain extent, and won't want to buy into the lie. They certainly won't want to buy into a something that they don't want. Like, so you got people who want to avoid lies, and you got generally people want to avoid bad things that they just don't think are valuable or useful. Critical race theory is like the raw sewage, version of a cup of coffee. Like, so you can imagine you're going into a coffee shop. They got regular coffee, they've got chai lattes and cappuccinos and all these things, and then they have this. They call it sewer water drink, and it's literally just sewer water that they've used to make coffee. Well, obviously, nobody in their right mind is going to want to drink that swill, right? But they're going to try to sell it to you anyway. So how do you get somebody to want to drink the sewer water coffee? Well, what if you went into this coffee shop and you saw a whole bunch of people standing around the counter like, just drinking that coffee. They're drinking coffee, but you don't know what it is at first. And you're like, man, what do they like so much? You see like 6 people all sitting in the counter. They're just like smiling. They're happy. Like, God, this is great. God, I love this. And so you're curious, right? You want to know, like, what is it that I could be missing out on? I don't want to be left out. So you go up to the counter and you ask, what is it that you're drinking? And they're like, oh, it's this latest like Starbucks double X plus brew of coffee. And you're like, oh man, that sounds awesome. Let me try some. So they pour you a cup and you go to take a sip out of it and you're like, you smell it and you're like, man, this smells awful. Like, why? In your mind, you're thinking, because you're surrounded by people who are enjoying it. You're thinking to yourself and you're like almost wondering like, man, did I get the wrong cup? But you're not saying anything because you don't want to stand out. And so you look around and you're not sure why people are drinking it, but you smell again and you're like, oh, whoa, what is this? And you ask the barista, you're like, are you sure this is the right coffee? And she picks up the mug and she's like, smells it herself and she's like, oh yeah, that's the right stuff. All right. And she has a big smile on her face. So you sit there and you're like, man, what's going to happen at that point through social pressure and influence? You're seeing all these people around you enjoying the sewer water coffee. Your own senses are telling you there's no way in hell you'd want to drink that. But because we're such intense social creatures, because you want to be accepted and you don't want to miss out on what other people are doing, you're going to suppress your own disgust instinct and mechanisms and actually try to give this a fair shot that maybe it's you. Maybe there's something wrong with you, and that's the reason why you're not enjoying the sewer water coffee. And then you might even convince yourself to take a sip. So why does that work? Well, it's because social influence. The way that the lie has to work, the way that you believe a lie, which is in this case that coffee is actually good, or that you'd want to do something or how do you convince somebody to do something that they otherwise wouldn't do? You need social pressure. The only way for the social pressure thing to work is if everybody in the store, all the paid actors, are doing their job and they're pretending like it's amazing. All it takes is one of those people. Let's imagine you're like about to take that sip, even though you've like third check, you're like, man, is this really the right coffee? And the barista's like, oh yeah, definitely the right coffee. So you're about to take your first sip, you go to take it, and then the person next to you is like, oh, no, this coffee's awful. This is like disgusting. Man, I hate this. Why would I want to do this? All it takes is that one person, and you're like, oh, okay. You breathe a sigh of relief. I'm not alone. You're right, man, this coffee is disgusting. Like, why would anybody want to drink this? Screw this. Let's get the hell out of here. Let's go to another coffee shop and let's not drink from, the legs of mesylthene. So the way it works is you need total agreement. You need, in order for a facade, in order for a mind trick to work, you need social influence and you need everybody to participate in that social influence. All the people have to be in on the lie. All it takes is one person to not go along with it, and the whole illusion falls apart. And now droves of people are going to be like, I don't want to deal with this. Only the most socially influenced people are going to want to buy into the lie at that point. So this is why this Ron DeSantis story, and this is why what's happening in Florida and these other states is huge, because it's effectively equivalent to the guy next to you at Starbucks who's potentially about to drink the sewer water coffee, being like, whoa, don't drink that water. Don't drink that coffee. And you're going to hear that. Sane, rational people are going to hear that and be like, okay, thank God I'm not crazy. I'm not going to do this either. Now we have an example where critical race theory, which is arguably designed to create divide and conquer, pit races against each other, pit families against each other. It's basically designed to create the next civil war, and could even be global, I would argue, aren't going to be buying into it as much. Anybody with anybody with, 6 calories worth of energy to expend on thinking about critical race theory should recognize the racism inherent in it and the race baiting. So the fact that droves of people aren't seeing this is only due to sheer social pressure and influence. I'm not in schools right now, but I'd imagine if I was in a high school and I had all of my classmates buying into this whole white guilt critical race theory nonsense, I'd be feeling a lot of pressure to do it, But if me and a couple of my friends said, this is crazy, we're going to create a counterculture to go against this, now all of a sudden a lot more people are probably going to want to be open-minded to seeing critical race theory is not a good thing. So this is really good news. Now, the reason why it's really good news is not just because people aren't going to be buying into critical race theory. It's because critical thinking, being logical, truly value-oriented, believing in patriotic values. So basically, like all the good things that we need to believe in and foster and fight for that made the best country in the world, because it was the most free, written into the founding documents. That's what I mean by best country of the world. And has the likelihood of creating a society and a world that finally and forever gets rid of the negative influences of the cabal. We are living in a time where it's very important for people to do that. And so when you as an individual bravely decide to walk off of the mind-controlled plantation and stop buying into the political correct lies that are spewed every day into the media, you, by your very action, are acting to spearhead truth, freedom, and justice. When a whole state does this, when somebody in authority does this, when somebody as a politician or a celebrity does this, it has a lot more influential power. Not to say that what we do doesn't have any power and influence, but it works a lot better to inspire people who are kind of on the fence. And then you get a critical mass effect happening. So we're not just having the disavowance of critical race theory with respect to what has happened in Florida this past week. This itself is going to inch forward the required skills and consciousness of freedom in general. And all counter-narrative ideas, all countercultural ideas that are aligned with truth, freedom, and justice are going to be more palatable and more socially acceptable now that we have a state doing this. And there are other states doing it too. So really, really big news. I can't stress enough how important that is. Okay, so where were we about? It's about 8 o'clock right now. Let's see. All right, so what we're going to do now, I'm just going to quickly go through a few stories, and then we're going to end the free version with this awesome video by this 8-year-old girl who's speaking to a Collier school board. And man, what she has to say is awesome. You're definitely going to want to see that. Before we get to that, friendly reminder, we're going to start the private version of the subscriber chat. Go to the chat if you're on YouTube or in the description. Look at Subscribe Star. Sign up for $3 a month. You can get access to the Zoom room where we're going to start the private chat. We do these 2 times a month. Really awesome. Really appreciate the support you give us, because this helps do a lot of things that we do for Stillness. And it's really not that much. I mean, $3 a month. Come on now. How much money do you spend every week on food or gas or things that like almost directly go to China or the cabal? I think paying $3 a month is not a whole lot to ask. So go ahead and do that. While we're getting that done, I'm going to go ahead and run through these stories. So social media bans on Trump largely ineffective. So according to the New York Times, this is pretty cool. Quote, when Facebook and Twitter barred Donald J. Trump from their platforms after the Capitol riot in January, he lost direct access to his most powerful megaphones. On Friday, Facebook said that the former president would not be allowed back on its service until at least January 2023, citing a risk of public safety. Give me a break. Hold on one second. But since his ban and President Biden's inauguration, Trump has posted statements online far less often. However, some of his statements have traveled just as far and wide on social networks. So what's the punchline to this? The punchline is that no matter how hard they tried to censor Trump, they literally stripped him away. You couldn't even share his statements on Facebook or Twitter, or you'd get flagged and suspended. It didn't work. Most people still were able to see his statements anyways. As a matter of fact, it just drove up the interest in seeing what it is. You know, you imagine you're walking down the street, you're in the city, and there's a shop owner that the police are over there and they're trying to put curtains all over what the shop owner's trying to sell. And then you go to walk by, the police have gone. You tell me you're not curious about what's happening behind those curtains? Yeah, you're damn right you are. It's the same basic concept. You censor somebody, you tell somebody that you can't listen to what this person is saying, you're going to be like ravenously curious about this. And this is what's happened. They've utterly failed. And I think this is good news, because if the cabal were really this all-powerful bunch that had it all figured out, and they really wanted to silence somebody like Trump, you think that they would have hit the master button already? No. What I think this indicates, and this is my personal theory on the cabal were their best and brightest like 150 years ago. What we got now is a bunch of drug addict, rich, trust fund babies who have inherited the symphony of mastery that the cabal used to get up to that point 150 years ago. And now we got a bunch of disrespectful, spoiled brat cabal people like Nancy Pelosi and other people like that, who have no respect for proper process and just think that they can wave the big dick of intimidation to get people to do what they want. And it ain't working, because bulldogs like Trump are able to do what they do. Despite the censorship, he can still reach millions of people. And the New York Times itself admitted this. So really good story there. By the way, I'm going to take all of these notes. I'm going to put them in Subscribestar. So that's another cool thing about Subscribestar. I take literally everything I'm reading from now, all the links, my copy, the research notes, everything. I dump it all into Subscribestar at the end of the stream, so you can have access to that. All right, so next story. Supreme Court rules against immigrants in temporary status seeking green cards. This is pretty big. I was not expecting this. So the Supreme Court quotes, the Supreme Court held on Monday that the government can block non-citizens who are in the U.S. under a program that temporarily protects them from deportation in certain situations from applying for green cards if they entered the country unlawfully. So this is really big news. I don't have time to go into the full particulars of why border security and legal citizenship is so important, but it's vital. The same reason you want a house guest that you invite into your house to honor your rules and listen to the rules of your house is the same reason we want illegal citizens in the United States. It's highly unlikely that a random stranger breaking into your house and eating your food and wanting to sleep in your bed with you is something you're going to be amenable to and you're going to want. So using that as a basic analogy, as a country has laws and borders for a reason, because the people in that country need to be citizens and contribute to the society that protects everybody. And this is something we don't have. I know I said I wasn't going to get into it, but I can't help myself. Let me get into a little bit. Okay. So when you think about being a citizen of a country, especially if you're on the more truther side, we tend to think, oh, the United States is corrupt. They've had false historical events that have gotten us into wars. We've got corruption there. The CIA is involved in drug running. So it's like, man, the US is corrupt. A lot of countries are corrupt. So why in the hell would I want to voluntarily give back to a country that is arguably extremely corrupt? Well, despite the fact that it's ridiculously corrupt, you can still go to your house and flick on the light switch and it's probably going to work. You still have indoor plumbing. You still have the ability to do all sorts of things. So despite the fact that society is ridiculously corrupt, there is enough benefits that you wouldn't be able to live the life you're living now if it wasn't for the monumental amount of energy and effort that it took to lead up to this point. Like, you know, in the modern world, we take it really for granted. I was having a conversation with a friend a few days ago about this. You know, it's a miracle that you can even hear what I'm saying right now. Like the symphony of coordination and effort and work and dedication and enterprise and industriousness that had to be piled on generation after generation to get to the point where we could even have electricity or running water or police protect us from criminals so we don't have to, you know, worry about vagabonds and things like this is monumental. Part of what being a citizen is recognizing that the place in which you are living and enjoy the benefits of was helped made possible by the laws of the land. And the United States in particular tried to really enforce this, although the socialists, you know, over the 150, 200 years or so have really eroded that down. So yeah, having the ability to prevent illegal immigrants from gaining citizenship is very important. It's not just a token gesture. We want to have legal immigration because what a legal immigrant does is it creates somebody who's going to consciously recognize the benefits of the society that allowed them in the first place. The society, your prosperity as a citizen is directly dependent on the laws of the land and the people who occupy the offices of that land to administer and ensure the justice of the land. Again, I know we live in a corrupt country. Believe me, I get it. I know that we've got a lot of corruption. Despite that corruption, there is still a tremendous amount of benefits. And you want people living around you that respect the laws, respect your rights, and want to make sure that they uphold the laws of the land. If you just allow a bunch of immigrants to come in and just gain citizenship without having that respect, then you dilute the social fabric of the country, and eventually it degrades and erodes. And history shows one of the best ways to destroy a country or an empire or a community is you allow a bunch of immigrants to come in to start gaining the benefits from that community, but not having the respect or the admiration or the proper community identity to reinvest into that community. Huge discussion there. Maybe I shouldn't have even bothered trying to, but hopefully you got something out of that. So good news with that. Now let's, last thing, okay. So the Russia is dumping the dollar. And this is a pretty good indication that something interesting is going to be happening with the dollar. Now, you know, people have been talking about the whole collapse of the dollar for years, and it's entirely possible that this was a plan that has been, you know, coming down the pike for a very long time. Well, it seems like, you know, this year we might have something major happen, or in the coming years. The cryptocurrency market tanked somewhat recently. The dollar has been artificially propped up for a very long time, especially after the 2008 crash. So when Russia sells off all of its sovereign wealth and wants to switch to euros and China's physical gold, then that indicates that there's some type of shift happening. Now, what happens? I don't know. On the negative end of the spectrum, you know, it could be the Green New Deal, financial reset, global Great Reset. It could be the Great Reset that we've heard so much about, which on the surface sounds good. It's like, oh man, universal basic income. Like somebody's going to pay my rent. Somebody's going to pay my cell phone bill. Somebody's going to make sure I have food. Doesn't that sound great? Yeah, not really, because what you have to sign away for those securities is like really bad. But maybe it's on the better end of the spectrum. Maybe there's some global financial shift happening. Maybe the so-called quantum financial system is going to be put in place. Maybe the revaluation where the artificial impositions on gold and silver and other assets is going to be removed, and we're going to have a revaluation of all sorts of currencies, and that'll put us off in a better footing. Who knows? I've even heard that we're going to be transferring to some spiritually evolved credit-based financial system where your value as a soul, which is secretly how the financial system's set up, is going to be more acknowledged. So that could be happening. Who knows? So yeah, there's a lot more I'd love to talk about with respect to financial things, but we'll have to leave it there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to, as a last show of the free version of this stream, I'm going to show you a really cool video. Let's see here. I'm going to unplug myself. Where now you can probably hear me. Am I unmuted? Yes. All right. So now I just got to start the stream or the screen share. Let's see. Here we go. So check this out.
Hello, my name is Sayla Cook, and I do not like these masks. And this building is about, like, I forgot his name, but he saves the black people and like to be free, so they didn't have to do certain things. And we need to be free too.
One thing, this is an 8-year-old girl. This is an 8-year-old girl, everybody. Just keep that in mind. Like 8 years old. Wow.
It's not just the black people that have to be free. Everybody has to be free. And these masks are just terrible. And I remember I saw Mr. Fishbone pulling his masks under his nose. And I'm pretty sure that was your rule. And these masks are horrible. And one of my friends said that his friend fainted because of a mask. Wow, congrats. And you don't even know how these other kids feel. They're breathing in the same dirty air, and my cousin said they're afraid to take off the masks. Great job. You're creating public schools with fearful children. Wow. I'm so proud of you guys. Wow, amazing. And I don't think barely anybody likes masks in schools. Their children are suffocating. You don't know what it feels like, and it's nonsense. Seriously. Why would you do that? Why in the world would you do that? And God created us so we can be free people. And we're not being free here or at public schools. Okay, so I would take your masks off if I were you. And I'm not wearing a mask right now, and I never will as much as I can. And George Washington made America so we could be free citizens of the United States of America. And the Statue of Liberty is for liberty and freedom, and we're not free. So maybe you just don't believe in George Washington or God, or like the boss of you or someone is controlling you. Stand up and take these masks off these children. Don't be afraid. And we voted you to be the school board members we wanted you to be. Okay, so please make the schools better, not worse. Goodbye.
Our next speaker is number...
Wow. Man, that girl gets it so well. Like if even half of the country had a thimble's worth of the patriotic spirit that girl has, we would not be in the situation that we're in right now. So I was so inspired to every time I see a video like that, and there's a bunch of them out there, I'm just like, man, thank you, God, for giving me a little bit more hope and recognition that I'm not the only one out there that thinks, things need to change. So yeah, really good. So with that, we're going to start transitioning over to the private Subscribe Star version of this discussion. Again, if you're on YouTube, go ahead and go over to Subscribe Star. I've got a link in the description. I've got a link in the chat room. Some people are asking, Desiree, I can't do anything with the description. So there's some people are asking like, hey, I canceled my subscription. Can you go back in and activate me? I can't really do anything to your account. So you have to go to subscribestar.com, sign in, go to subscriptions. You'll see Stillness in the Storm, or just click on the link in the description once you're there. I'll even put it in the chat for you guys, and just reactivate your subscription. If you are having a hard time with the Subscribe Star and you have already sent me a donation, I don't often do this, but I want to make sure it's fair for everybody. If you have sent me a PayPal donation or any donation anytime in the past couple months, and you want to access the stream, the private version of the stream, send me an email right now, justin.deshops@stillnessinthestorm.com. That's justin.deshops@stillnessinthestorm.com. Ask me for the Zoom link, and I'll let you have access. So with that, for everybody else, thank you so much, YouTube. Signing off, and we're going to go ahead and switch over to the private version, and I'll see you guys in a little bit.